10 players in and transfer records smashed. In this pre-season preview, we check whether Aitor Karanka will be living La Vida Loca at the City Ground this season. Hello and welcome to the Forest Ramble, and we're going to preview the forthcoming season, look at some of the signings that have been made and some of the feeling of what's going on around the City Ground. I'm joined by Steven Toplis. Hello, Steven.
Hello.
And first of all, before we get into the details, how are you feeling about England's performance in the World Cup?
Surprised, but yeah, really happy. That was a great tournament, and it's always nice when England do well. I'd have taken semi-final, I'd have taken quarter-final before it started, so it doesn't matter what happened in the end. Yeah, it's disappointing to lose how we did in the semis, but...
Does it just go to show that, as a football fan, you're better off when your expectations are set at realistic levels rather than expecting the best all the time?
Yeah, I think that helps. And then when you do have that success, you tend to enjoy it that little bit more.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we learned, and this is a theme we may come to later with regard to Forest, is the importance of management style as well. I think it's great to see England players actually feeling relaxed at a tournament. It's great to see them having a good relationship with the manager, the whole camp having a good relationship with the press. I don't think that would have happened under the previous managers, and it's that kind of whole relaxed feel that comes. And the other thing I would say is at the end of the matches, the fact that it wasn't just the players who went up to applaud the fans, and at the end of the semi-final it wasn't just the players, it was the coaching staff, the physios, the medical staff, probably the tea lady was out there as well. Every single person in the England camp were out there, and I thought that was really symbolic.
Yeah, it was a nice touch, and it shows the connection that the fans now have to the team and vice versa, whereas before it's been very divided and the fans haven't been able to relate to the players and feel like the players are playing for them, whereas now that connection is there, and you can see that the players are enjoying the fans' reaction, and the fans are obviously enjoying a successful team that's playing well and showing that they want it, but in a good way.
Yeah, and of course the thing is that having had this experience, there's a lot of optimism that this will lead to good things in 2 years' time, in 4 years' time, and so on, because of the management style, because of the fact that England players are able to enjoy being England players again, which, by all accounts, wasn't necessarily the case.
No, and hopefully that will happen. The more this team plays together, they're going to improve. And the important thing is that they use this as a starting point rather than an achievement and then we go backwards again after, which has happened before.
Yeah, and of course I thought it was it's quite interesting that Southgate did make the point, like, we don't want any kind of reception or we don't want to fuss even when our plane comes into land. He'd given instructions to Birmingham Airport, like, no, keep the fans away. Because we haven't done anything worth celebrating in terms of an achievement, a tangible achievement. All we've done is taken a few steps forward.
That's good, a good way to do it. And also won a penalty shootout.
Well, yes.
So,
and I think via WhatsApp we were discussing this, weren't we? I was saying that I wasn't concerned about the current crop of players in terms of their ability to do well at penalties, mainly because I think they're far enough removed from the penalty failures of previous years, generationally, that the mental block, and that's what it is, wouldn't be a problem. I was pleasantly surprised to hear exactly the level of preparation that Southgate and the coaching staff had put in to even things like timing how long it takes between the whistle blowing and someone actually running up to kick it. Yeah. That was astonishing stuff, and if you're not aware of that, listener, then please do check it out. There are a good few articles in The Guardian about it as well. Look up Guardian England penalties, and there's some really sort of good psychological stuff in terms of how to overcome that mental barrier. And it's worth noting that when Jordan Henderson missed, and he looked the most nervous, but also he basically went up to it as soon as the whistle blew, whereas the other players, they just did it in their own time. Like, I'm just going to saunter up and take my penalty when I'm ready. On TV, it looks like a matter of a few breaths, but those extra seconds can make all the difference, I think, if you're the one taking it and if you're the one trying to save it.
I agree. And does this mean Forest might finally win in the playoffs?
Well, now we know that anything is possible.
Yeah.
But will it come to the playoffs? Who knows? I think it's... what I'd like to do is we'll talk about transfers, because I think transfers are the big news over the summer. We'll do that in a bit. But as you've mentioned that kind of psychological factor, I think it's worth referring to some of the things. There have been a number of wags on social media making reference to the ill-fated "We're Serious About Promotion" campaign of, 14, 15 years ago? Yeah. And saying, you know what, but this time it feels like we really, really are. Like, actions speak louder than words. And in fairness, the club, in terms of the way they've gone about things, just... since the current hierarchy have taken over, but particularly in the last sort of 4 months or so, really feels like big steps have been made to kind of backing up promises with actions. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. And you can see that this group who run the club now, and the boardroom, the important figures in the boardroom, are far more professional and far more switched on about how to run the club successfully than previous incumbents. And that will translate right the way through the club. It will affect the coaching staff, the players, everyone down to the tea ladies, the kit men, and it will just add that extra professionalism that runs throughout the club, and it all comes together eventually on the pitch, and that's where you see positive results.
And conversely, worth pointing out that under the previous owner, that there was a lot going wrong behind the scenes. So we had staff resigning or being made redundant, even people like dealing with the website, dealing with marketing, the kinds of job roles that you should never have to, as a fan, you should never have to think about in your football club. And you could see people leaving and actually grumbling about leaving, moving on to other clubs and being very successful at other clubs in those same roles. And it kind of says, well, what does that say about the competence of the people who got rid of them?
Yeah,
if those people have proven to be very competent at other clubs.
Exactly. I was going to say that there were a lot of good people that left the club in that time, and that was a shame because it just adds to the discontent around the place and that feeling of, well, what's going on?
And if you're a member of staff at the club, when you're seeing other good people going, and this goes for any business, you do start wonder not only what's going on, but, well, is it going to be me next? And of course that's going to affect your performance in your own job.
Exactly. And if you were to look at the players, it's like if they have a manager that they really like and the manager's getting something out of them and has improved them and improved the team, and then that manager suddenly goes, the players are wondering, well, what's happening? What's happening next? New manager comes in. Does that mean I'm going to be leaving if he doesn't fancy me or whatever? Sean O'Driscoll being a good example of that. Yep. Somebody who the players wanted, and then he was cast out and
of course
that's turmoil.
Yeah, and actually it's an odd one really, because I think Sean O'Driscoll is probably the last manager we had who actually did go on a bit of a signing spree, not spending spree, because of course he was appointed with something like 3 weeks to go before the season and about less than 10 first team players. So he did have to go out and sign a whole new team himself. Now he was playing in the bargain basement. He was signing loanees, he was signing free transfers, he was signing people. Simon Cox was the only big money signing at 2 million. And I think it's fair to say that the actions again behind, with the club in terms of the scouting network, O'Driscoll had to do all the work by himself. So now we've got a scouting network. We have this connection with George Mendes, which I'm sure we'll return to later. And in terms of the infrastructure to sign them, what has been noticeable is it has been Nick Randall's cardboard cutout who's been there at the signing of every player. And that, I think, is quite symbolic, because it kind of shows, to me, you could interpret it as saying, well, Karanka's off doing the football stuff, okay? He's identified players, and he can trust Nick Randall and, what's his name, Rensos.
Yeah.
He can trust them to get the business side of things over the line. Now, I could be wrong on that, but that's the impression that I get.
Yeah, and it's encouraging to see Randall so involved in that process, and shows that he's at the club and he's doing his work, and it's a professional attitude that he's got towards the club to improve things by bringing in the players and just making sure that the club is being run in the correct manner.
Yeah, and of course I think that's one of the reasons why we've had, a practicing lawyer appointed as chairman, because in terms of compliance, and there were all kinds of compliance issues going wrong, late payments, suppliers being let down, contracts being broken, and that's just the stuff that we know has been reported. And so I think it was quite symbolic that a lawyer was appointed as chairman. But a chairman, when they've got a chief exec, isn't always that hands-on. And Nick Randall has clearly been having a very involved role with getting things on and off the pitch, shipshape. Now, it's worth remembering, for those of you with very, very short memories, that it hasn't all been plain sailing, because they made promises at the start of last season, and then Warburton was unceremoniously dumped. Is there anything different this time round?
They're not making those same kind of promises. They're just quietly going about their business. They're not coming out and saying, we want promotion now, or Karanka has to get promotion, otherwise we're going to have to reassess, or whatever it is. There doesn't seem to be that pressure being put on by them. Certainly not publicly. In private, they might have had conversations saying, we want promotion, and we want this, that and the other, which is fine. But when you go public with that, that can add a sense of... it can add an extra sort of layer of pressure and expectancy, which can affect the players, it can affect the management, and it adds pressure to the club.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go about things in a quiet but professional manner, I think it just, without leaving the fans out of it, the fans are still being connected with, but there isn't that pressure being added to it, which has perhaps happened before with people like Fawaz, even the "we're serious about promotion" tagline, what that did. Yeah, pressure-wise and expectancy on the club, and we nearly got relegated that season. So, quiet professionalism, I think, is a good way of
so deeds rather than words. Yeah. Okay. So if we're thinking about that, I mean, I say there is a feel-good factor. Season ticket sales have absolutely, they've rocketed. Nearly 20,000 season tickets sold for a club who have been in the second division and below for 20 years now. Okay, let's be realistic. Some of that is down to very, very competitive pricing, particularly for younger fans. Now, personally, I don't see a problem with that. We might have had people baiting our neighbours down the road, down the A52, for doing similar. But all along, I was going, that's a really good strategy, though, because it means that more often than not, Derby's ground is full. It means that there's a new generation of Derby fans coming through. So I'm very pleased that Forest have adopted a similar kind of policy. You are one of the new season ticket holders yourself, aren't you?
I am, and I've got my card now.
Yep, okay.
Ready?
So presumably that is a sign of your own optimism.
It is, yeah. And it just feels positive, everything about the club at the minute. And it's certainly one of the factors into why I decided to get a card. Also the price, it was a good price, but there's nothing wrong with that. If it gets more fans through the doors, or through the turnstiles, and they're spending money when they're at the ground, and then renewing their season tickets year after year, bringing their kids along, and that new generation coming through and following.
Well, exactly.
The club,
that's the thing. Is that even if
it's positive,
even if it costs a couple of quid per match for a child to go to get a season ticket, which isn't much at all, the chances are you'll see the benefits in terms of programme sales, food and drink sales. They might go to a club shop 2 or 3 times in that time and spend some money there. So it generates revenue accordingly, doesn't it? So again, it just smacks of sort of a slightly broader view being taken by the people running the club. Now, we've gone on about lots of positives. Let's think about something that people have been a little bit more... let's just say they've been a little bit more sort of concerned about. The money we've spent. We're going to come and talk about the actual players, but we've paid 15 million euros for a player who's barely played, 50 first-team matches in his entire career. We've paid £6 million for a 30-year-old striker. You could say a journeyman striker. We've paid a few million for an Algerian who's been playing in Croatia. And obviously we've got agreements to sign the other 2 Portuguese lads at multi-million euro deals if things go according to plan. Are we just throwing money at things? And if so, is that a bad thing?
I think you have to look at what we've done in the transfer market for the last 4 or 5 years. For one reason or another, because of financial fair play or transfer embargoes, we haven't really spent a lot of money on the squad, and that's been reflected in our league finishes, being in the bottom half of the table and even flirting with relegation a few times. And that's because we haven't been able to bring in real quality that's going to take us into the top half and beyond. So, yeah, there's always a little bit of risk when you're spending large sums of money. Because if those players don't work out, it's a lot of money spent on not very much. But we have to think about our ambition and where we want to be, and also look at what other teams in this league have done over the years. When you've had, some teams have been held by parachute payments coming down from the Premier League, but Villa spending money, Fulham have spent a bit. Wolves are the best example of a team that were down the bottom of the league, spent some money, had a George Mendes link as well in there, and they're now promoted and looking forward to Premier League football.
You've got to get got to get all the pieces of the jigsaw in place, though, haven't you? So it's
you have.
Wolves spent a lot of money, and they got 4 or 5 really good and quite expensive players via the George Mendes link. It's fair to say, though, and we've mentioned this before in last season's podcasts, that they also had a handful of journeyman footballers around them.
Yeah.
And that, the credit for that goes to Nuno Espirito Santo for making the poor players play better and enabling the good players to do what they do well. And, of course, that is what team building is about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Building a team and building a team that works well and plays better than the sum of its parts. So I guess if we have faith in Karanka to be the man to do that, then great. If not, then we could be in the same situation we were the year before, last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, where we end up having to press the reset button midway through season.
Yeah, that's always a risk, but hopefully that won't be the case now, because the owners made it clear when they appointed him that Karanka was the man that they wanted, and in their defence, Warburton wasn't their appointment. So I can forgive them for getting rid of Warburton and bringing in somebody who is their man and backing him as well. And this is the first pre-season and full preparation that Karanka's going to have working with the squad and the players that he's brought in. So that's a positive for me, because we're going to see now what he's really about and what his teams are really about over the coming season.
Okay.
And to go back to the point I was making with the money we've spent, I think, look at the transfer market in the Premier League. It's been inflated, the sums of money that are flying about for players, and that eventually does work its way down into the Championship, and we're seeing that now with some of the money that's been spent. So for me, if we want to be in the top half and playoffs, automatic promotion, whatever that is, you have got to spend a bit of money to get there.
Okay.
So for me, it's just a necessity.
Okay. Elephant in the room, Aston Villa. Aston Villa they've just announced a new investment from a pair of multi-millionaires involved in different sports, and it's investment they desperately need because they spunked a huge amount of money and didn't go up, and they're in real trouble. So isn't there a danger we're going to end up being next year's Aston Villa if things don't work out?
We're in a position where we can afford to spend that little bit of money, and if it doesn't quite go right in the first season, we will be okay to have another crack at it for another year or two before we get caught out by financial fair play, potentially, if those rules are still in place then. Think of it like Derby, how they spent a bit of money to get into the top half, and they had a couple of goes at it and they couldn't quite get over the line. And I think we'll be in that same position where if we can just get ourselves into that position and then strengthen when we're in that position,
but Derby,
gives us a better chance of going up.
Derby have had a difficult summer as well.
They have, yeah.
They've had to think about the amount of money they're spending, about their wage bill. By all accounts, and this is unconfirmed, but by all accounts, they've actually been quite willing to sell Mate Vidra because he's one of the big earners. He's probably their most bankable asset, but they've not been able to get anyone to take him. So there's a cautionary tale as well, potentially. And that's not to say that, obviously, actually, if Vidra does stay, it could end up being a bit of might create FFP problems, but it would be a blessing in disguise for them because he's the one who's most likely to be able to get them into the playoffs or into promotion positions again. But speaking of players, we'll be back in just a minute and we will talk about the players in and the players out at the City Ground. Thanks for joining us today for this pre-season Forest Ramble podcast. So we're going to talk about things on the pitch because, you know, everything's been off it so far. And in terms of things that we've seen so far, well, we've seen the players doing lots of stuff in very hot weather, and they've been to Spain and had some good results, albeit against middling opposition on the whole. Couple of goals that stood out. Gil Diaz scored what was frankly is like a computer football goal, wasn't it? Where you just basically got the ball and just ran through, did a little bit of a shimmy and a little bit of a feint, and then just got through on goal and just put it away. Your favourite goal though was Benny Osborne, wasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't know it was Osborne when I watched it. I had to look back and is that really Osborne? Sticking one in the top corner with his right foot on the half volley. Yeah, unbelievable hit.
Yeah. Now. Obviously, Benny Osborne, funnily enough, what's notable in that match was that Gil Diaz was wearing number 11 and Benny Osborne wasn't. And we're not going to get to, you know, the whole squad numbers discussion is one for another time, really. But it's going to be an interesting one because, you know, Benny Osborne could well be losing his place, you know, in the first team. There's going to be some weeks where he's probably not even going to be on the bench because we've signed a lot of players. And as we talked about in the first half of the podcast, this has all been about having more competition for places and better options in every position. So I'm going to start off actually with some of the players who've gone out, because I think that in terms of illustrating, I suppose, the difference in squads now. So we knew that Vaughan and Hobbs, we announced that at our end of season podcast back in May. Vaughan and Hobbs, David Vaughan's managed to get himself a job just over the river, over at Notts County, so good luck to him there. Jack Hobbs is training with Bolton at the moment, so again, good luck to him. I think, you know, they're both, I mean, Vaughan will do really well, won't he, at Notts County?
Yeah, good move for him.
And if Hobbs can, you know, if his fitness is strong, then actually Bolton could be quite a good fit for him as well. Eric Lehigh, the one who I think a few people were disappointed to see go, but fair play to him, he was going, you know what, if I'm not going to be in the team, I want to be going somewhere where I can play. And then, of course, as soon as he signs for Hull, then they go and sign Todd Kane on loan from Chelsea as well. So he's going to have some serious competition for his place. So I think, again, we wish Eric all the best, don't we? And he's had a very, very, very... him and Kat have obviously made a big impression with fans via their social media feeds and the whole thing about the dog and everything. So they leave with most people's well wishes, I think. And, of course, crucially, for Eric, I don't think he's going to have to move house, which, bearing in mind that Mrs. Eric has got her business in, where's it, Sutton in Ashfield or wherever. Yeah. So good luck to them. Another player who's in that similar kind of situation is Andreas Bouchalakis. Is not confirmed, but by all accounts he's moving on, probably moving back to Greece. And it's that thing again of he could sit on his bum picking up his wages here in Nottingham, but actually he wants to go back to Greek football so he can play. So fair play to him. Naturally, we need to mention, of course, once again, the retiring outgoing skipper, Chris Cohen, who will still be at the club, which we're delighted about. And then that leaves a few others. So, Armand Traoré, by all accounts, he's off to Turkey. I think it's just one of those things. He's a classic example of why some players aren't going to be good enough to stay at Forest, along with Michael Mancienne, who had an offer from Turkey, but, you know, for whatever reason, that's not happening. Both Traoré and Mancienne are players who show flashes of being really good, having real ability, but it's flashes. And if you have like half a good match in every 4 matches, that's not really enough, is it?
No, you need that consistency in the Championship, and those players are not up to the standard that we're looking for really now if we're going to push on.
Yeah.
So,
and also the other thing about those players as well is that mentally, you can tell that mentally they've suffered a great deal. So Traore himself has actually said, well, confidence is a problem, and that often happens with players who've had a lot of injuries. Mance, when he plays well, he looks really good. He looks like it doesn't matter that he's 4 inches shorter than the centre forward he's up against, because he has that turn of pace. He just has that decisiveness, and those are the first things that go. You get leggy, you make silly mistakes when your confidence is gone, and so we need someone who's mentally stronger as well. And we'll think about that when the players are coming in. And then Lee Tomlin. It looks unlikely he's going to be coming back, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think Cardiff want a bit too much money for him.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not he can get game time there in the Premier League, I don't know. He's not really managed to establish himself at that level. No. So it would be a shame. There's also question marks over his fitness, and we would need to try and get him in as soon as possible if we wanted to see the best of Lee Tomlin, rather than bringing him in halfway through a season and he's not quite up to the pace of it. So.
Yeah, you see, I would put him down as being one of those 1 in 4 players. Now, the difference being is that when you've got an attacking 1 in 4 player in that one match, hey, you know what, they can really make a big difference and make a big impression, and that can give them the confidence to go on and do it maybe the next match and the next match after that. But the thing we saw with Tomlin was that people had his number after the first sort of 5 or 6 matches, so they knew to double mark him, they knew to kick him up in the air, and therefore that's why we need other good players around, I think. There's a school of thought, and tell me what you think about this, that we don't need Tomlin anymore. We've signed other players who are probably he needs us more than we need him at the moment.
I would agree. Yeah, we've added some quality in the final third. Players like Carvalho and Goncalves as well coming in. So yeah, I don't think we really will miss him all that much. Or we're in desperate need for a player like him.
Okay. Then we've got 3 of the younger players, 2 homegrowns and 1 bought in, who've gone out on season-long loans. So Tyler Walker, gone up the road to Mansfield. Good move for him.
Yeah, an opportunity to get regular game time and score plenty of goals, which he's done before in that league, in League 2. So, good move for him.
And as we said last season when he had a spell in the Forest first team, is one of the things that he had shown signs of was bulking up and developing physically. And I tell you what, if a season in League 2 is not going to do that for him, I don't know what will. So I would still have some hope that he would have some kind of future at the City Grounds, actually, because I think he has got enough ability. He just needs to kind of learn how to do it more regularly.
Yeah, he needs regular football, and realistically he's not going to get that at Forest. So a season with Mansfield is a good move for him and potentially for Forest in the future.
Okay, what about George Grant? George Grant's off on loan as well. He's gone to Luton Town for a season, so he's stepped up a division. Do you think he's got a future at Forest?
Potentially. It's the same sort of thing with Tyler, in that he needs regular game time and he won't get it at Forest at the moment. So going in at Luton will be a good move for him. League 1 now. He was in League 2 last season with Notts, and then moved on to Scunthorpe for a bit. So I think he's gone up a level in terms of where he's going to be playing his football all season, and that's a good move. And potentially he could come back next summer, having had a good season, and be ready to feature more for Forest.
And of course, the other player who was out at Notts last season was Ryan Yates, and it remains to be seen. Paul Taylor at the Post was saying that he reckons that Yates is likely to go out on loan again, because with Guedioura and Bridcut and Watson and Colback ahead of him, he's not going to get much game time. But the word is that he's really seen as a very strong prospect for the future. So if you can get, again, it sounds to me like if he's going out on loan, maybe to League 1 level for a year, get a full season under his belt there, having had half a season last year, that could be something that would be very good. And depending upon what division we're in next season, it could open the door for him at the City Ground. The other player who's gone out on a season-long loan, and this is confirmed, is Jason Cummings. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't think he's got much of a future at the City Ground.
I would agree with you, and I'm surprised that we haven't tried to move him on permanently. because if you look at how he got on at Rangers last season, he was doing all right for them, and I'm surprised they didn't come back in for him. But then again, they've had the new manager Steven Gerrard, so perhaps he doesn't fancy him. I would imagine that after this season, he will leave the club on a permanent basis.
I would also add that in our five-a-side team, we've got a Peterborough fan in there, and on WhatsApp this morning, because it looks as though Jack Marriott's likely to go to Derby, he was saying that that'll be a big loss, and I was just saying, yeah, but I can really see Cummings doing really well at League One level. I think he's got enough pace, he's got enough of an eye for goal. It'll help him develop physically. He needs a run of games, and at that level, if he gets a run of games, I'm confident he'll score goals. I just can't really see him staying at the City Ground in the future.
No, it doesn't look like he's got much of a future certainly with Karanka in charge.
No. So let's talk about the players who we hope do have a future with Karanka. Obviously, we signed the best part of a new team in January, and of course, so some of those players are obviously still there. Some of those didn't work out. De Jager got injured straight away. Fuentes is still at the club, technically. And having had 45 good minutes and then unfortunately got injured, the word on the street is that he will still remain at the club under the care of the medical staff and will have a chance to earn a contract, once he improves, gets back to fitness. So it seems as though Karanka has a lot of faith in Juan Fuentes. But let's talk about some of the players who have signed for us over the summer. So the first one, and the earliest one, was the most predictable one, which was Michael Dawson. Free transfer, 2-year deal, 34 years old, straight into the first team?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. Yeah, he's still got a lot to offer, and his experience is going to be crucial. And his passion for the club. You can tell straight away, as soon as he come back, how he was talking about being back at Forest and what it meant to him, and being the club where he started his career.
Yep.
You can see he's glad to be back.
Yeah. And oddly enough, considering that Hull was his hometown club, he actually seems to talk more warmly about Nottingham, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Bear in mind here, that's where he had his football education. His wife's from Nottingham. He lived more of his life in Nottingham than he did in Hull. So the other thing is that I think there's a good contrast. The thing I was saying about Mancien earlier, Dorse does make mistakes. He's always made mistakes in his career, because as a defender you do. But he never lets it get him down. He picks himself up and goes back to playing the same way again as he did 10 minutes before. And that's one of the things, I think that's kind of mental resilience he's had. And that's how he ended up being the captain of 2 Premier League clubs. That's how he ended up getting some caps for England. It's not just what you can offer with your feet, it's what you can offer with your head as well. So I think that's going to be a vital factor. And while we're on the subject of centre-halves, the second signing, well, technically the first signing, I suppose, but in terms of confirmation, was Tobias Figueiredo is permanently a Forest player. And what a player he was in the second half of last season.
Very good, yeah. And him and Dawson at the back, that's a solid centre-half pairing.
Would you say that's likely to be the first choice centre-half pairing?
I'd be surprised if it isn't. And then Joe Worrell is your third choice, and he probably will get some game time as well.
Yeah.
While he continues to develop.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's fair to say that Joe Worrell is kind of, there's obviously a little bit of physical resemblance to Dawson in terms of his build and the blonde hair and everything, but I think it's fair to say that he's the heir apparent, isn't it? Yeah. I'd be surprised if Worrell doesn't get some game time, and I'd be surprised if Worrell's future isn't at the City Ground, because even though he didn't play really much under Karanka last season, I think that's because with Figueiredo and Fox performing the way they were, Karanka's very much one of those, get your defence right and then other things will follow. So, okay. Then we've also got the Portuguese lads. So we've got João Carvalho, Diego Gonçalves, Carvalho at 15 million euros. Holy moly, that's a lot of money.
Club record signing.
By a considerable distance, yeah. And Gonçalves on a season-long loan with a fee agreed, but we don't know what that fee is, but word on the street, it'll be at least 10 million euros. And then shortly followed afterwards by Gil Dias, who is, again, season-long loan, is likely to cost probably a little bit more than Carvalho if that loan becomes a permanent transfer. Now, those are the Jorge Mendes connection. Now, be honest, Stephen. Last season, were you one of the people grumbling about Wolves and the way they were using Jorge Mendes?
To a degree, because I thought, well, they're spending way too much here, well beyond their means. And if they don't go up, they could be in serious trouble. But on the opposite side of that, I think, well, it worked for them.
Yeah.
And
it's modern football, isn't it?
It is modern football, yes. And they found a formula that worked for them and has got them promoted. And clearly Mendes knows good players that can be brought into championship teams and players who are willing to go to championship teams. And we've got 3 now coming in who could potentially be very important players for us this season.
And in the future.
The important thing with those as well, they're all young.
Yeah.
They're players with potential. They're not 29, 30 and after a couple of years perhaps don't have as much resale value and we're going to lose money on them. Mm-hmm. If they do well, Forest will do well. And if the time came for them to move on to a bigger club, for example, we're going to get even more money for them. So it's an investment.
By the sounds of it, that is the polar opposite. You know, we were talking about Sean O'Driscoll cobbling together a team. That's the polar opposite of that, because those were journeyman professionals who were sort of mid-career or even late career in a couple of cases, and therefore the chances of you getting any return on that investment, well, Forest were only, it was, you know, we were punching above our weight at the time O'Driscoll was sacked with the team we had, and then, but those players had no resale value, did they? So, no. And you know, I mentioned about Cox being the player we paid a big money fee for. We didn't get any money back off him, really. Like, we made a big loss on him. So, you know, that idea of signing young players, well, at the very least, if Forest end up top half of the table and knocking on the doors of the playoffs or failing in the playoffs, then we can probably still, sell them on back to Portugal or whatever. And with agents like Mendes, you know that there'll be a big money fee involved. So it's an interesting one. I personally, I didn't like the way Wolves are doing it, and to a certain extent, I'm still a bit uncomfortable with the amount of money that's involved here, particularly as we've had our own issues with FFP in the past. But at the same time, you just have to accept that's modern football, and Wolves made it work. They spent the money, and you could see the quality of player they had as a result of spending the money. And as you said earlier, you don't spend that money, and you end up with a middling championship club who are treading water, basically. Okay, let's go back to the signings. The next one, another player that, let's be honest, we haven't heard of, Hilal Sadani.
Algerian international. He's got a decent record, in fact, for Algeria. He's something like 21 goals in 39 caps. It's really not too bad.
That's not bad. Considering he doesn't always play as an out-and-out striker.
No, he's also a winger. So he's got that versatility to him. Mm-hmm. He can play across the forward line. Mm-hmm. So we might see him more as a winger rather than a forward, but at least you've got that versatility.
Yeah.
49 caps, 22 goals.
Still a decent record.
Still a good return, yeah. So he's got an eye for goal, and throughout his career at Zagreb and Guimarães, a healthy scoring return.
Well, he was the top scorer in Croatia. Was it last season or season before? But
yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's really impressive if you think about the forward players we've got now, because the next one we're going to talk about was Lewis Grabban. Now, £6 million for a journeyman centre forward, but on the other hand, £6 million is a decent fee to pay if we haven't had a 20-goal a season striker since Britt got injured in his first season with us.
Yeah.
And that's 4 years ago. And a 20-goal a season striker is basically, that could be the difference between promotion and not, couldn't it?
Yeah, and you look at his record last season. Scored 12 goals on loan at Sunderland, and they were at the bottom of the league. They were relegated. Moved on to Villa, scored 18-15 there. So his record last season was very good.
Yeah.
So that alone makes it a good investment, because he's showing he knows where the goal is in the Championship. Yeah. And as you're saying there, with 20 goals a season, you could see him reaching that tally.
Yeah.
And that could be the difference between finishing 9th, 10th, 11th and having a decent season to being in the playoffs or even better, yeah.
So the other thing about Graben is that if you look at his career, we're talking about young players with potential. If you look at his career, I think he's kind of one of those Darren Huckabee types. Probably very good at Championship level, not quite good enough for Premier League. But, just like Bournemouth have done, well, in that case, let's say we go up. Well, sell him on for 4 million, and that's still well worth the 2 million investment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it brings much greater riches, much greater reward. Now, looking at that forward line, as I was saying a few minutes ago, so we've got Carvalho, Gonçalves, Diaz, Soudani, Graben as a centre forward, we've got Brereton as a centre forward, we've got Murphy as a centre forward, and the signs are that Murphy is fit again, and that was probably what the problem with him at the end of last season was. And signs are that he is part of the first team picture again. We've also still got Joe Lolly, we've got Matty Cash, we've got Benny Osborne, who has played quite a lot of football in that sort of position. I'm sure I've probably missed people out, to be honest, but again, with the exception of Graben and Murphy and probably Brereton, but Brereton's slightly different because but Murphy and Graben are both definite number 9s. And the others can all move around. And Karanka has said, I want them to be moving around. I want them to be interchanging. I want them to basically be doing their own thing while not disrupting what the team is doing, in terms of the shape and the performance and the tactics, but hopefully disrupting the opposition defence by doing so. So it seems as though tactically we're getting a real flavour for what Karanka wants to do.
Yeah, and the worry was when he came in that we would be overly defensive and
quite rigid.
Rigid and boring. But by the sounds of this, he wants the creative players to be given the freedom to create and cause problems for the opposition, and that will hopefully see us play good football over the course of the season and successful football at that.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So if we go work our way backwards, Jack Colback. Confirmed yesterday. Now, this seems to me to be a very good deal. He's got a year left at Newcastle, so we've signed him on a season-long loan, and all being well, if things go the right way, we're going to get him on a free at the end of that year, and especially if we go to the Premier League, we're going to get him on a free. And that would be astonishingly good business. The other thing is I would imagine the loan deal is partly so that Newcastle can keep paying a big chunk of his wages while we're still in the Championship.
Yeah.
So that could be an astonishingly good deal if that's the case.
And the talk is he's on 40 grand a week at Newcastle. So if we're not paying that, or we're only paying part of it as part of that deal, then that is very good business.
Yeah.
And we saw last season the difference that he made alongside Watson in the midfield. And with a full pre-season under his belt, I think he'll be even better. And in the Championship, he's a very good player. So I'm happy with that.
Do you see Watson and Colback being the two first choice players in that sort of line of two in front of the defence?
Yeah, they suit the Karanka system well.
Yep.
And with comes back to that full pre-season, full fitness. I think they're going to be key elements to how we play. Look at Middlesbrough when they had Whitehead and Ledbetter. Similar kind of players in there. Perhaps not going to bomb forward all the time and get on.
And then more recently with Ledbetter and Clayton.
And Clayton, of course, So solid base in the midfield to make us competitive in there, and then they're also going to give those creative players that licence to express themselves.
And although they do sit back, both of them are capable of making a run forward if they need to,
Watson's got an eye for goal in particular. So
well, he started off as a winger and he's not lost that kind of energy, has he? I guess the legs probably go a little bit as you get a bit older, so he won't do it as often, but he's still shown the willingness to do that. The other thing, behind them, I guess they'll have Bridcut and Guediora as the kind of the backups. Watson has also been confirmed as the captain for the forthcoming season. Perhaps a little bit of a surprise, bearing in mind that Dawson's come back to the club.
A little bit, but I can only assume it's because he had the captain's armband for a time last season,
and he really impressed with it.
Exactly.
That's it. There were plenty of occasions where, in that second half of the season, where you could just see the difference it made. Watson doing the stuff that isn't visible if you're just watching on telly or whatever, where he's constantly, barking instructions to his defence, passing messages forward and backwards, yelling over to the bench. having a word in the ear of the ref when no one's looking, that kind of thing. And that's what he's proven to be very good at. And again, those years of experience have made him that. And he's the first sort of vocal captain we've had in several years, really. I think Dorse is very vocal, but Karanka keeps saying, you want to have 5 or 6 captains at least in your team. Doesn't matter who's wearing the armband, so that says something. Okay, working our way backwards. Jack Robinson.
Yeah, left back come in, and I'm assuming this is because of Fuentes being unable to play. We've gone out, and instead of having, say, Ben Osborne filling in that position, we've now gone out and signed a specialist left back. Young player as well, he's 24, 25, so...
Specialist left back who played last season at centre half.
Yeah, but I imagine that he will be at left back and not looking at anywhere near.
Yeah, I mean, Karanka's more or less confirmed that, I believe. So, okay.
And he's not too old, 24, 25, so he's at a good age. Free transfer as well, so I think that's a good deal. Yeah, and he's decent at this level. He's been at QPR. He hasn't played a great deal there.
Well, he was injured the season before last, wasn't he? So I think that's one of the things in terms of him. How many minutes has he got under his belt, and hopefully that season of playing at centre half can give him that kind of physical security, I suppose, to play at left back when he will need to maybe get up and down a bit more. But he's, by the look of it, he's going to have competition from Ben Osborne, who apparently has impressed at left back in pre-season. And I say, if Juan Fuentes does return and sign, then you'd imagine that Osborne will be regarded more as a midfielder again. I think it's fair to say that Benny's still going to be very much part of the first team picture. And then the final signing is the one that, again, confirming a loan signing, Costel Pantilimon. I think that's a really important one, don't you?
Yeah, he was good for his after joining. Yeah. The second half of the season, he was an upgrade on Jordan Smith, as much as I rate Smith, and I think he's got a bright future. He's an experienced goalkeeper, and we saw what he was about last year, and it's important to have that established number one and that experienced number one to go alongside your defence now, which is looking reasonably solid. It's just a good signing, really. Yeah, simple as that.
And you could see the difference in those last matches of the season when Capino was filling in. You could see the difference that Pantilimon's experience. He's played at top level in a number of European leagues. He's played international football. You can see what a difference that makes, and obviously just his sheer size and presence. It's that kind of thing that gives defenders real confidence. And bless him, I'm loath to blame Capino, but he was a little bit flappy, a little bit unsure, didn't seem quite so confident when he came into the team. And that's the kind of thing that the presence of Pantilimon gives. Now, personally, on the basis of the little I've seen of Capino, I would actually say that Smith is a better choice as the backup keeper, because I think Smith has the more potential to be that really vocal presence, to be someone who's a little bit more commanding and willing to come out for crosses and everything. Sure, he's not the finished article, but he's a kid, in goalkeeping terms anyway.
Yeah, and working alongside Pantilimon, you would hope is going to improve him day by day, being alongside such an experienced figure.
Which of those signings has been the one that's really caught your eye?
I would say probably, Dawson on an emotional level, just because it's great to have him back at the club, and he's one of my all-time favourite Forest players. So seeing him back in the red shirt is going to be something really nice. That first game of the season, and he's back in the team. I think Colback is a good signing in terms of statement of intent. Experienced player and a player of real quality in the Championship, and I'm also excited to see how the Portuguese lads get on as well. I think they're going to bring a technical quality to the team that's perhaps not there at the minute, and creativity. They are really highly rated.
Yeah, and of course, seeing how Diego Jota played for Wolves last season, I mean that boy just tore up the Championship, didn't he? And that was, sure, it was pace and it was physical ability, but it's just also sheer technical ability. He was unplayable at times, wasn't he? And so, particularly with Carvalho, but also with the two boys on loan, it seems as though they have the real potential to offer something similar. And to have three of them, we could potentially having them playing in a line behind a striker like Graben, who's he's capable of leading the line. He holds his position. He knows exactly when to be in the box and exactly when to be at the front post and back post and so on. So to have the potential of those three players, and we've not even mentioned, for example, Joe Lolly, who can play on either wing, can play as a number 10, proved to be a really important signing in the second half of last season. Very, out of the signings we made, the permanent signings we made in January, he was the one that stood out as the one who really had the most to offer, and one where you kind of going, well, I'm really glad we got him.
I think we did well to get him.
Yeah.
And you put him in alongside these players and hopefully he'll be even better this season.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is competition for places it's that thing of players sort of having to up their game and having to do really well and make their impression in training and off the subs bench, and then knock on the manager's door and say, look, I can do it better than he can. We're going to have a lot of games, so is the squad still too big?
Yeah, I would expect a few players to leave. Figures like Jamie Ward, I imagine, will be moved on. And there'll be a couple more as well, I think, who'll go before the transfer window shuts, which shuts on the 9th of August. I think so. It's not going to be 2 or 3 weeks into the season. You more or less got to get your deals done before kick-off. So, which I think is a good move, and I think it just helps stability
and what do you think?
Squad.
And what do you think about the way that Karanka's handled those players? He left some players at home from the pre-season tour. He went to the press, went to the Post and said, no, I told them at the end of last season, you're not going to be part of my plans, go and find yourself another club. Is that reasonable, the way he's dealt with it?
Yeah, he knows what he wants, and he's been honest and open with those players, so they know where they stand. And I think that is a positive move, because he can get the players who he wants around him, and he can work with them and focus on them and focus on the team and the players that he's going to be using over the season.
Now, the cynic in me is going, right, on the one hand, he's saying to other clubs, and if we look at the mid to lower table championship clubs, well, you know what, or even clubs in League One, players like Ward, like Mance, they could go to some of those clubs. They might not be able to afford their wages. So, is he doing a little bit of emotional blackmail by kind of saying, look, if going to the press and kind of saying, well, I've told these players they're not going to be part of the picture. If they want to stay, that's up to them, but I've told them they're free to find other clubs. Is that almost saying to the fans, I've told them they're not going to be part of my team, so they're probably just hanging around to pick up their money?
Possibly.
Or am I just being a bit naughty?
Yeah,
there?
I mean, yeah, I just look at it from it's an honest point of view that he's taken here, and everyone knows where they stand. And yeah, probably some of those players haven't been the most popular with Forest supporters, Mancian in particular, so it probably sends out a message that players like them can be moved on because they haven't got exactly what I'm looking for. So some fans are going to pick up on that and think that's a good move.
Yeah. I mean, having said that, the other thing to bear in mind is, and to put the counter-argument to my own point, is that for those players as well, their agents will be wanting to get it down to the wire to try and get a better deal for their clients.
Exactly, yeah.
So it'll be like, well, Mance, there's this offer from Turkey, the Turkish second division, and it'll involve this much money, but you'll have to move your family and everything. But I have a sniff that Ipswich or Bolton or whoever it might be able to offer you a deal which is, and I reckon if we push it until the deadline, we might be able to get an extra £1,000 a week or something like that. It could be the case.
Yeah.
And I'm picking on Mance just purely as an example. I'm not saying that there's anything about him, and we certainly don't know anything about that. Okay, so if I was to ask you to sum up in a sentence how you feel about the forthcoming season?
Feeling positive and excited to see how we get on.
Okay. I think most of us are, aren't we? It's certainly the most positive and excited we've had in a rational sense as well as an emotional sense, I think, because we've had, every football supporter gets false dawns at the start of the season. And that excitement is only going to ramp up, as the weeks go by. Obviously, we're going to keep podcasting throughout the season, because we want to hear from you. So we will put messages out on social media and make sure that you get in touch with us. We look forward to what will hopefully be an exciting and hopefully successful season ahead at the City Ground.